For this 6th edition of the Boicozine videos about magazines, I've grabbed a whole heap of magazines that are no longer with us. Dear departed magazines that have folded or closed for whatever reason, that were actually quite good. The first one up is Dummy. Now Dummy was a music magazine. It never announced it was closing, so it could magically reappear at some point. I don't know why. But it was designed by Dean Langley, who is art director for ID magazine, and you can sort of see some similarities. This was the last issue he did actually. After that, they did this weird thing where they actually sent all their design over to this place in Canada, which the people that design all the Vice magazines. It's a really weird operation. It's really anonymous. It's just like, we'll design a magazine for you and then you can have it. It doesn't really tell you who's involved or anything. It's really quite anonymous and weird. And I kind of like to think that that's partly, why they might have closed, because they took their designer out of the magazine and put them in a box and hid the box away. It still looked alright. It didn't look nearly as good as it did when Dean Langley was involved, and sort of there was a real sort of quality to the photography and a real sparseness, and just for a music magazine, it was really unusual and really gave focus for the actual music itself. Just really plain, sort of almost stark stuff, but really readable. Like, it looks like hard work, but actually there was a certain warmth to it. Maybe it was the uncoated stock, the pithy sort of headlines. I mean, the editorial is really good as well, even if they do give a large amount of the magazine over to the killers. And this is interesting pages, just like almost like not a fanzine. It feels a bit 80s. I don't know where it's coming from, but there was just something that felt really like they were into the music about it. I didn't realise their best song for being on the rebound was Pulp's cover version, bad cover version. It's a bit weird. Should probably have read it in more detail. The back page too was just like this really lovely fluorescent pink colour, really nice. Later on too, with the spines, they actually put text. Like they would just write a sentence on the spine, which was a really nice treatment. This was a magazine you might have heard of if you're an old die-hard indie fan like your humble narrator here. It's another magazine that EMAP managed to kill off, though it was of its time. It was pretty much, if you're into Blur and Oasis and Pulp and all those bands, this was your sort of glossy mag that you would read and catch up on all that stuff. When it all went a bit wobbly, they did a redesign, which is what you can see here, but it didn't actually last terribly long. But again, it was really unusual in that it's for especially at the time, it was quite sparse, and a lot of the imagery became quite sort of melancholy and a bit dark, like this Elastica picture here. They're usually seen as like crazy, indie pop darlings, and here they're all sort of in the shadows and looking a little wan, and they talk about them taking smack and stuff. It's pretty much like the redesign followed the sort of waning fortunes of the indie scene. It sort of became stark and a little grim, and to reflect what was going on. It's kind of a shame that they started like having to advertise really horrible shirts, to try and get advertisers interested. And I have a feeling EMAP would have been really focused on numbers, and if they weren't getting the ads in, balance that with, are they getting the readers in, and the answer would have been no, cull it. So that's what happened to Select, but a brave attempt to resuscitate it there. This was a magazine that I was really excited about. It's called Work. It's about work. Everyone does it. you know, everyone sits in, or not everyone sits in an office, but everyone goes, you know, to a workplace, or, you know, they have to do certain things. Why isn't there a magazine just about this? I mean, it's such a big part of our lives. So this was really exciting. It was designed by a group called Projects, and they did a really interesting thing where the whole magazine felt like one big sort of long piece of work. So you see the white backgrounds with the yellow sketches that goes throughout, and then they sort of placed the articles on top of it. So I started flicking from the back and realised you wouldn't get the impression of that, so I then started from the front. But every article had a different typeface, which was denoted in the contents page, and then they would sit on their own little coloured sort of block to denote where they sort of started. Then this video is not great, but there were different shades of grey, and then you go into the pink and the green, and it was just it was like opening a manila folder full of random stuff. I love this spread. This is the only full page spread in the whole thing, and it's right in the centre. It's almost like the centerfold. We love work. Yeah, it only lasted 2 issues, but really interesting little mag. What's up next? Relax. Relax is probably one of the more well-known magazines out of this bunch, I think. It was the sort of Japanese style magazine if you wanted to find out about what was going on in Tokyo or Osaka or wherever. For a long time. It closed a couple of years ago after a bit of a weird redesign. I always loved the contents pages. Couldn't actually read the text on that one very well, but they would just be like really casually taken, but still really sort of, you get the sense they're art directed, but with a very light touch, you know, and they would just sort of place the contents over the top. They had, back there, they had the, you know, a lot of Japanese magazines would have photos of people on the street. They would take photos of people in business suits, or girls wandering around in traditional sort of outfits, or, you know, people at the beach. It was really refreshing compared to what was around. This issue was one of my faves because it had a whole bunch of Jeff McFetridge stickers, and I just realised that I must have used one. I don't know where I've put that. They feel too good to use, but then they're stickers. You've got to work out what you want to stick them on, I guess. But they would just obsess about particular things in each issue. Like this issue is just obsessed with making shoes, and who's making shoes, and what sort they're making, and how many patterns they come in. This was good too. This was about going back to school, like cookery school, or it couldn't work out what that was. It was like gambling school or something, guitar school. It was just like extracurricular activities, and a bunch of people going back and you know, learning a few sort of dorky skills. They always had this section too called Sunday People, which was their chance to say we're different from other Japanese magazines because look, these people are so relaxed. They're just hanging around. They're not rushing around caught up in the whole Japanese way of life. That was Hero Mix as well. They worked with so many really good creative visual people. There was Jeff McFetridge, there was Hero Mix, there was, you just saw Mark Gonzalez, James Jarvis, just any sort of really hip image making people, they were in there, and they were usually doing a cover or something. Like it wasn't just like a little mini feature. I miss Relax. This is the last one, Good for Nothing, which lasted 8 issues and was pretty much the last gasp for Sleaze Nation as far as I can figure, because it had a lot of the people involved in Sleaze Nation running it. So it was sort of when Sleaze Nation became Sleaze and then Sleaze died, Good for Nothing magically appeared. And it was free, which was really weird. Like, it was at the time when there were lots of free newspapers and stuff coming out. So this idea was like a free quality magazine for young people in London. I think that was the selling point. And really nicely art directed by, oh excuse me, running out of saliva. Yeah, art directed by Rob Lowe, who you might know as Super Mundane. So, I mean, this issue, it had a lot of sort of handmade stuff in it, but as it got as the issues progressed, there was more and more of that sort of hand drawn and really nicely sort of handmade sort of typography, and a bit like this back section, which was for music and bands. This back section became even more sort of handmade, and it was like, you know, watercoloured sort of bits of type and all sorts of lovely stuff. It's a really nice to look at and a really sort of cheeky, chappy read, typical London styly, and really good. I missed that one too. That was quite a good one. And on the back page, a big thing with a pasty on it. Don't know what relevance that has. So that's a few poor old magazines that fell by the wayside. I hope you enjoyed them. And I'll see you later. Bye!